I keep hearing Nancy Pelosi and others say, if we do not vote to raise the debt ceiling, then what will happen is the full faith and credit of the United States will be destroyed because we will default on our debt. Now, I want to walk you through this. It's very, very important because this is your country, these are your taxes, and these are more scarce. So I went and I looked. What part of that goes towards debt service every month? Approximately $44 billion. Now, wait a minute. If the federal government's receiving all forms of income taxes and user fees, $320 billion a month, and $44 billion a month is what the debt service costs, how will we default? We won't default. That's the point. Then they say if we don't raise the debt ceiling, then we're not paying for all the expenses that took place in the prior administration. That's another bald-faced lie. That money's already gone. In order to raise the debt ceiling, we're talking about forward spending on additional programs. That's what we're talking about. They want to raise the debt ceiling in order to pay for their massive, massive re-engineering of society, redistribution of wealth, and the imposition of their socialist agenda. That's what they're talking about. Now, how do we know this? Number one, it's a fact. And number two, every single House Democrat just voted to do exactly that. Those of you who live in these districts that are marginal or slightly Republican, slightly purple, and you have a Democrat who claims when they go home that they're moderates, they're not moderates. They just voted to blow the lid off the debt ceiling. And they voted to do that up until December 22, 2022. So in other words, they want to do it to get through the midterm election so they don't have to vote on it again. That'll probably defeat it in the United States Senate, but that's what these phony moderates in the House are all about. Number three, what do I think they're going to do? I think in the end, and I could be dead wrong, but I think in the end what the Democrats and Biden are going to do is they're going to push most of what they want, their agenda, in this bill and just slice the cost. Just slash it. Look, these people are Ponzi schemers anyway. These people don't care about debt and all the rest. So if it's $3.5 trillion, they'll lower it to $2.5 trillion or $2.2 trillion and just keep the vast majority of the redistribution of wealth, these massive expansion of the welfare state and so forth in there, and they'll just say, okay, they're paid for. Now, if in fact all of this is paid for, like Nancy Pelosi says, there's no cost, like Joe Biden says, like the New York Times reporters say, and so forth and so on, then why have a debate about the debt ceiling at all? It's all paid for. We don't have to raise it, right? All right, some additional points I want to make to you on this, too. There is a requirement that if we get to the net, that is $320 billion a month, right, minus the $44 billion a month for the debt service, that there is a priority in which the money has to be spent. That includes Social Security, Medicare, the VA, federal pensions, among other things. So those will be paid no matter what. They're the first in line after the debt service. And the reason you have to pay the debt service first is because the 14th Amendment compels it. It says, the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection and rebellion, remember, this was passed right after the Civil War, shall not be questioned. So those come first, the debt service. Then you have the entitlement programs, we call them. And then the rest that's left, well, Congress and the president have to work out priorities. They have to live within the budget. They can't borrow any more money. And so what Nancy Pelosi and Biden and the others are telling you is the economy will collapse, that we will default on our debt, which we certainly will not, that people won't get paid Social Security, they certainly will, and they're trying to scare the hell out of you. Because this is what they do. They play chicken in order to massively expand the expenditures in the budget. And so I wanted to point that out. Now let's look at a few other aspects of this. Nancy Pelosi has said, and James Clyburn, the number 3, has said, and the others have said, well, if the Republicans don't raise the debt limit, the President of the United States can, under the 14th Amendment. A couple of things. I already said there's no reason to raise the debt limit to pay the debt service. One has nothing to do with the other. So they confound it, and they confound you when they say that. That's number one. Number two, what they really want is for a president, one of theirs, to lift the cap altogether, to be able to do it unilaterally. Why? Well, think about this. Think about how totalitarian this is. If the President of the United States has the power himself to raise the debt limit, he has the power to make sure, under that theory, that the debt is paid. I don't mean the debt service, that the debt is paid, right? So he can raise taxes, he can borrow money, he can raise the debt limit, he can do whatever he wants. And that's what Nancy Pelosi says they're going to threaten if they don't get their way. So think about how totalitarian this mindset is on the left and the Democrat Party. Again, the 14th Amendment says the validity of the public debt of the United States, the public debt of the United States, authorized by law, including debts incurred for payment of pensions and bounties for services suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. Okay, it won't be questioned. $44 billion a month. But what the Democrats are saying, and their mouthpieces in the media, is the debt, not the debt service, the debt. Now, if in fact Biden or Pelosi or any of them try that, they would be clearly violating the Constitution of the United States. Why? Because the core function of Congress is financial. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. See, you're a smart people. You're a smart audience. You know, this isn't NBC or ABC or CBS or CNN or MSNBC. This is Fox. We have smart people in our audience. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 1. The Congress shall have power to lay and collect taxes, duties, imposts, and excises to pay the debts and provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States. Congress. Nothing in here about the president. Now, the second clause right behind it, Congress shall have the power to borrow money on the credit of the United States. The president doesn't have the power to do any of that. This is the same Democrat Party, the same Congress that was suing Donald Trump left and right to prevent him from building the wall, from moving funds from one account to the other. And the court said he had the absolute constitutional authority to do it. But when they're in power, they don't want any limits whatsoever. So I just wanted to make this as clear as I could. Again, recap very simply. We get $320 billion a year into the federal treasury. $44 billion goes towards debt service. Plenty of money to cover it. This has nothing to do with the debt. They want to increase the debt ceiling to nothing, which is what the House just voted to do, so they can pour their trillions and trillions of dollars in mostly unconstitutional spending into that system. The Republicans have said, no, we're not participating in that. Good for them. What do I think is going to happen? I could be wrong. I think the Democrats are going to draw down the budget, I think, their proposal to about, whatever, less than 3.5 trillion, which is really 5.5 trillion, to something like 2.5 trillion, but keep all the stuff in there so they can get a leg in the door on those things if they can. And then the so-called moderates can say, oh, man, we cut $1 trillion off this or so forth. Just keep an eye out for that. I hope I'm absolutely wrong. Nancy Pelosi said the other day, this is for the children and women. I have no idea what she's talking about. If it's for the children, we're bankrupting the children. Our children, grandchildren, generations yet born, we're spending wealth that's not even created yet. And why? There's no need for any of this. 50-50 Senate, they got a 3 or 4 vote majority in the House. They have no mandate for any of this. So we're going to turn the country inside out and upside down for generations to come. A disaster. We already have inflation, product shortages, the price of gasoline and food going up. Can you imagine adding several trillions of dollars to that? But it's more than that. They have put every radical idea they can possibly think of, whether it relates to critical race theory, whether it relates to the degrowth climate change movement, whether it relates to an attack on the capitalist system, on and on and on and on. They've put everything they can possibly think of into this omnibus bill, which is 2,500 pages. 2,500 pages are like this. It's like this. And we ought to fight this tooth and nail, not just for financial reasons, that would be enough, but for every other reason in this bill. And among other things, there are billions and billions of dollars in this bill for radical left community activist groups. What are they going to do with the money? What do you think they're going to do with the money? They're going to build an army of electoral volunteers. So every election, they will be out there and they will have the ability, thanks to you subsidizing them, to affect the outcome of an election. I have told you before, the Democrat Party is a very diabolical political organization, very diabolical. It supported slavery. It supported segregation. It led the way on Jim Crow. It doesn't embrace Americanism. Now they claim it's democratic socialism when it's truly American Marxism. A very, very diabolical party. And they lie. And they lie. And their media surrogates lie. Now, a 2,500-page bill, how are we, the people, supposed to know exactly what's in it? We know some of what's in it. There aren't committee hearings. We don't get to participate. We can't even get into the Capitol building. If we wanted to contact our members, what would we contact them about? If we can't get into the specifics other than to tell them to kill the whole bill. That's not representative government, ladies and gentlemen. That is behind closed doors, smoke-filled room, in this case not cigars, probably marijuana, where they're trying to force their will on the American people in fundamental ways. This bill has to be killed, whether they bring it up next week or the week after or whenever, in whatever form it is.